Most people believe poverty begins in the wallet. They are wrong. Poverty begins in the mind quietly, invisibly, long before it ever shows up in a bank account. It begins as a thought repeated too many times, a belief inherited, not questioned, a silent agreement with limitation that feels like realism, but is actually surrender. The world does not keep most people broke through force. It does so through conditioning, through ideas whispered so early and so often that they begin to feel like truth. And once an idea feels like truth, it becomes law in the life of the person who accepts it. Every great fortune, every great achievement, every great leap forward in human history began the same way, as a thought that contradicted the accepted limits of its time. When Thomas Edison imagined light without flame, the world laughed. When Henry Ford imagined a car for the common man, experts said it was impossible. When Walt Disney envisioned a kingdom built from imagination, banks turned him away. These men were not smarter than everyone else. They were not born with special advantages. What separated them was simple and terrifying. They refused to accept the mental boundaries handed to them. Most people never do. They inherit beliefs the way they inherit eye color. People like us don't get rich. Money is hard to earn. Success is for the lucky. Dreams are dangerous. These ideas settle into the subconscious, and from there they quietly dictate every decision. The mind begins to aim low, not because it wants to, but because it believes it must. And the tragedy is not that people fail, it's that most never attempt anything worthy of their potential. Napoleon Hill understood this when he wrote that whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But belief is not a wish. It is a state of acceptance. And most people accept limitation without ever realizing they had a choice. The first prison is mindset, not circumstances, not education, not economy. The mental posture you take toward life determines what you notice, what you pursue, and what you dismiss as not for you. A broke mind focuses on what cannot be done. It searches for evidence of impossibility. It scans the world for reasons to stay small because staying small feels safe. A wealthy mind, regardless of current income, does the opposite. It looks for leverage, for opportunity, for patterns of success that can be learned, adapted, and applied. This is why two people can stand in the same situation and experience entirely different outcomes. One sees a wall, the other sees a door. The difference is not intelligence. It is belief. Belief is the engine of action. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your beliefs. If you believe you are meant to struggle, you will sabotage ease. If you believe wealth is corrupt, you will reject it when it approaches. If you believe success requires suffering, you will create suffering even when a smoother path appears. The mind always works to remain consistent with its deepest assumptions. Clarity is the first crack in this prison. Most people drift through life reacting, not directing. They have wishes, not visions. Fantasies, not plans. A clear mind knows where it is going, and because it knows, it begins to reorganize everything around that destination. Clarity sharpens perception. It turns noise into signal. It transforms random effort into focused momentum. Andrew Carnegie once said that the accumulation of wealth calls for power, and power requires clarity of purpose. He knew that scattered minds produce scattered results. The person who knows exactly what they want and why possesses a quiet force that unsettles the world. Clarity eliminates hesitation. It strips away excuses. It exposes the cost of staying the same, but clarity alone is not enough. Vision must be married to discipline. And here is where most people retreat. Discipline is misunderstood. It is not punishment. It is alignment. It is the daily act of choosing your future over your comfort. A broke mind seeks relief. A wealthy mind seeks results. One asks, how do I feel right now? The other asks, who am I becoming? Discipline is the bridge between intention and reality. Without it, desire evaporates. With it, even modest effort compounds into extraordinary outcomes. This is why Hill emphasized the habit of persistence. Not talent, not luck. Persistence, the ability to hold a vision steady long. After the initial excitement fades, look closely at history, and you will see this pattern repeated. Abraham Lincoln failed more times than most people attempt. He lost elections, businesses, and years of his life to obscurity. But his vision remained intact. He did not negotiate with discouragement. He outlasted it, and in doing so, he reshaped a nation. Action is where belief is tested. A broke mind waits for certainty. A wealthy mind moves with incomplete information. Waiting feels responsible, but it is often fear in disguise. The world rewards motion, not perfection. Each step taken refines the next. Each attempt sharpens judgment. Momentum creates confidence, not the other way around. Gratitude plays a role few understand. It is not passive appreciation, it is active alignment. Gratitude trains the mind to recognize abundance, and what you recognize, you multiply. A mind trained on scarcity will always find lack, even in opportunity. A mind trained on gratitude finds leverage even in adversity. This is not positive thinking. It is perceptual training. Adaptability separates those who endure from those who evolve. The world does not stay still. Industries shift. Skills expire. Comfort zones collapse. A broke mind clings to what worked yesterday. A wealthy mind studies what is emerging today. Learning becomes a lifelong discipline, not a phase. Curiosity replaces certainty. Humility replaces ego. Resilience is the final gate. Every path worth walking will test you. Not once, but repeatedly. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is the forge that shapes it. Those who interpret failure as feedback grow stronger. Those who interpret it as identity grow smaller. The mind decides which story it will tell. And this is where the transformation completes itself. When belief shifts, behavior follows. When behavior changes, results appear. And when results appear, identity evolves. The person who once thought wealth was impossible now sees it as inevitable. Not because the world changed, but because they did. Breaking free from mental poverty is not a single moment. It is a decision renewed daily. A refusal to outsource your destiny to fear, habit, or history. It is the quiet, relentless choice to think differently when thinking differently feels uncomfortable. Most people stay broke in the mind because breaking free requires responsibility, and responsibility is heavy, but it is also liberating. Because the moment you accept responsibility for your inner world, you reclaim power over your outer one. You were never meant to live small. You were never designed to merely survive. The same force that built empires, wrote history, and turned ideas into reality lives within you now, waiting not for permission, but for belief. And belief once chosen changes everything. That belief is not loud at first. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or certainty. It begins as a quiet rebellion against the old story you've been telling yourself. A subtle refusal to accept that this is all life has to offer. And that moment when you stop arguing for your limitations is the moment the mind begins to reorganize itself around possibility. Most people never experience this because they confuse familiarity with truth. The mind grows comfortable inside patterns, even painful ones. Struggle becomes identity. Survival becomes purpose. And when survival is the goal, greatness feels like a threat. This is why so many people mock ambition. Why they call dreamers unrealistic. Why they secretly hope others fail, because another person's success exposes their own decision to settle. Napoleon Hill warned about this invisible enemy. He called it the fear of criticism. The fear of what others might think if you step beyond the boundaries they recognize. This fear is subtle but devastating. It teaches the mind to self-censor, to shrink ideas before they ever reach action, to edit destiny to fit social comfort. But history does not remember the comfortable. It remembers the committed. The moment you decide to think independently, resistance appears. Old friends question you. Old habits pull at you. Old doubts resurface with convincing logic. This is not a sign you are wrong. It is a sign you are leaving familiar ground. Growth always feels like instability at first, because it requires releasing who you were to become who you must be. The broke mind looks for permission. The wealthy mind grants it. Clarity deepens when you understand this. Money is not the goal. Freedom is. Expression is. Impact is. Wealth is simply the tool that allows ideas to move at scale. Those who chase money alone feel empty when they get it, or resentful when they don't. Those who chase purpose attract money as a byproduct, because purpose creates value, and value is what the world rewards. This is why vision must be rooted in meaning, not ego, not comparison, but contribution. When your work solves problems, removes friction, or elevates others, it taps into an endless current. You are no longer pushing against life, you are moving with it. Discipline evolves at this stage. It stops feeling like force and starts feeling like devotion. You are no longer working just to escape pain. You are working to honor a calling. This is where habits become identity. You don't wake up asking if you feel motivated. You wake up aligned with who you've decided to be. Henry Ford once said that whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. But what he understood more deeply was this: thinking is not passive. It is creative. Thought is the blueprint of reality. Repeated thought becomes belief. Belief becomes behavior. Behavior becomes outcome. And outcome reinforces belief. This is the loop most people never interrupt. To break it, you must install new inputs, new language, new standards. The words you use internally shape the limits you accept externally. Speak of growth, not lack. Speak of learning, not failure. Speak of progress, not perfection. The subconscious listens to everything, and it obeys what it hears most often. Action now becomes strategic, not frantic, not desperate. You stop chasing every opportunity and start building leverage. You understand that effort multiplied by direction creates momentum. You focus on skills that compound, relationships that elevate, knowledge that expands your range of options. Gratitude anchors this process, not as blind optimism, but as grounding awareness. Gratitude keeps ambition from turning into anxiety. It reminds you that progress is happening, even when results are delayed. It trains patience without killing hunger. Adaptability sharpens your edge. When plans break, you don't break with them. You adjust. You observe. You pivot without losing the vision. The world rewards those who can hold a steady purpose while remaining flexible in approach. Rigidity is the enemy of longevity. Resilience now is no longer about endurance alone. It is about interpretation. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this developing in me?" Every setback becomes instruction. Every delay becomes preparation. Every obstacle becomes a filter that removes the uncommitted, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the identity shifts. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to succeed. You see yourself as someone who succeeds by design. The question changes from "can I" to "how will I?" This is the moment most people never reach, not because it is reserved for a few, but because it demands consistency when no one is watching. It demands faith before evidence. It demands courage before applause. But once crossed, there is no return. The mind that has tasted autonomy cannot go back to submission. The person who has seen possibility cannot unsee it. You realize then that being broke was never about money. It was about permission. And the day you stop waiting for permission from society, from family, from fear, is the day the inner chains fall away. From that day forward, every thought becomes a vote for the future you are building. Every action becomes a declaration. Every setback becomes temporary. And the world, which once felt heavy and limiting, begins to respond differently, not because it changed, but because you did. The transformation does not arrive with noise. There is no ceremony, no announcement. It arrives as a quiet certainty that you are no longer available for the old life. The excuses that once felt valid now feel insulting. The distractions that once consumed you now feel hollow. You begin to sense the cost of wasted time, and that awareness sharpens every decision. Time becomes sacred. Energy becomes intentional. Focus becomes a weapon. This is where most people retreat again, because focus demands sacrifice. To focus is to say no. No to comfort. No to distraction disguised as entertainment. No to people who cannot see beyond their own limitations. A broke mind fears missing out. A wealthy mind fears missing its purpose. One scatters attention. The other concentrates it until pressure turns into power. Napoleon Hill spoke often about the mastermind, the principle of alignment between minds moving toward a common aim. But before you can join such a force, you must become worthy of it. Your standards rise. You no longer bond over complaints. You bond over vision. You no longer seek validation. You seek execution. The people you allow into your inner circle shape the ceiling of your life. This is uncomfortable at first. Growth often requires solitude. Not loneliness, but separation. The space to hear your own thoughts clearly. The silence to refine your vision without interference. Every great builder spent seasons alone with their ideas before the world ever applauded the results. As this continues, fear changes shape. It does not disappear, but it loses authority. Fear becomes information, not instruction. You feel it, acknowledge it, and move anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear make decisions for you. And now something critical happens. You stop measuring progress emotionally and start measuring it structurally. Systems replace moods. Ritual replaces motivation. You build routines that carry you forward on days when belief feels distant. This is where discipline becomes invisible, woven into who you are, not something you force yourself to do. Learning accelerates. You no longer consume information to feel inspired. You consume it to apply. You study patterns. You observe winners not with envy but with curiosity. What decisions do they make daily? What standards do they refuse to compromise? What pain did they endure quietly while others quit loudly? Resilience deepens here because identity has shifted. Failure no longer threatens your self-image. It refines it. You stop labeling outcomes as good or bad. You label them useful. This detachment gives you a calm intensity that unsettles people who still live emotionally reactive lives, and gradually results begin to surface. Not all at once, not in dramatic fashion, but consistently. Momentum replaces struggle. Opportunities begin to recognize you. The work you once chased now pulls you forward. This is not magic. It is alignment. Gratitude now takes on a new dimension. You are grateful not just for success, but for the struggle that built your capacity to handle it. You understand that without pressure you would have remained shallow. Without resistance you would have remained untested. Gratitude grounds you, keeping ego from eroding the very foundation you built. Adaptability keeps you alive in changing seasons. You understand that no success formula lasts forever. You evolve without nostalgia. You let go without resentment. You upgrade without apology. The broke mind clings. The wealthy mind flows. At this stage, the external world starts to reflect the internal order you've created. Finances stabilize. Confidence solidifies. Decisions become cleaner. You no longer chase urgency. You operate from priority. And the most powerful realization settles in. You were never behind. You were unaligned. The past stops haunting you because it no longer defines you. Regret dissolves into wisdom. Mistakes turn into mentors. You see now that every detour had a lesson. Every delay had a purpose. Every loss cleared space for something stronger to emerge. And then comes the final shift, the one that completes the cycle. You stop asking life for proof. You become the proof. Your presence carries weight. Your words carry intention. Your actions carry certainty. You no longer need to convince anyone of your vision because you are living it quietly, relentlessly, authentically. This is what it means to break free from mental poverty, not to become obsessed with money, but to master the mind that creates it. Not to dominate others, but to command yourself. Not to escape struggle, but to transform it into fuel. Most people will never understand this path, and that is fine. You are not here to be understood. You are here to build. And as you move forward, with clarity in your vision, discipline in your actions, resilience in your spirit, you realize the ultimate truth. Napoleon Hill tried to pass down through generations. The only limits that ever existed were the ones you accepted, and now you no longer accept them. Once the mind has been awakened, the journey accelerates. You begin to notice patterns others ignore. You begin to see opportunity where others see chaos. And the most dangerous realization hits. The world does not owe you anything. No mentor, no degree, no safety net, no validation from anyone outside of yourself can replace the power of a trained, disciplined, and decisive mind. Everything you want, freedom, wealth, influence, mastery, lives inside your ability to think, believe, and act beyond the boundaries of comfort. Many people live their entire lives unaware of this. They chase trends, follow crowds, and equate busyness with progress. But busyness is often a substitute for courage. It is the noise people create to avoid the silence where real decisions must be made. Real transformation demands quiet. Real transformation demands facing yourself honestly. Without excuses, without rationalizations, without compromise. You see, action alone is not enough. Most people work harder but not smarter. They grind without direction, believing effort is a substitute for insight. But results compound only when energy is directed with intelligence. Discipline alone builds consistency. Vision alone builds desire. But the combination of focused clarity, relentless action, and adaptive intelligence builds empires. Whether in business, creativity, or personal mastery, look at the titans of history. Henry Ford did not merely build cars. He observed inefficiency in society, imagined a better way, and then applied methodical discipline to execute it. He did not wait for conditions to be perfect. He created conditions by sheer persistence and focus. Abraham Lincoln did not simply endure failure. He interpreted it, extracted lessons, and used it to shape decisions that would eventually save a nation. Walt Disney did not invent animation by luck. He invented it by refusing to quit. Even when every bank, every studio, and every critic told him to abandon his dream. These were ordinary men, broken and beaten at times, who made an extraordinary decision to refuse limitation at any cost. Your mind is no different. It may be clouded by doubt, fear, or years of conditioning, but it is capable of constructing miracles. Every thought you allow to dominate your subconscious writes your future as if it were stone. Doubt will carve prisons. Belief will build palaces. And you are the sculptor. The next step after belief, clarity, and disciplined action is mastery over focus. In a world of endless distraction, focus is a superpower. Most people drift, unconsciously allowing their attention to be hijacked by triviality, comparison, and gossip. But wealth of mind requires deliberate attention. You must guard your focus like a fortress. Every day you spend mindlessly scrolling. Every hour you waste entertaining excuses instead of executing reinforces the life you say you want to escape. The cost is invisible but real. Attention is the currency of achievement, and when you begin to harness focus, you also harness courage. Not the superficial kind that is loud or performative, but the quiet, unshakable courage that does not flinch in the presence of opposition, doubt, or failure. True courage is an inner alignment so solid that fear becomes information rather than instruction. Every time you act despite discomfort, every time you choose persistence over surrender, your courage compounds. It becomes a force that reshapes your external world because the world mirrors your internal consistency. Gratitude emerges not as a platitude but as strategy. Most people misunderstand gratitude. They equate it with passive acceptance, a silent nod to circumstances. But real gratitude is active. It trains the mind to notice abundance, not lack, possibilities, not limitations. Gratitude rewires perception. It turns obstacles into opportunities. It changes the energy around you. And energy, once aligned with purpose, attracts resources, people, and pathways that a distracted or resentful mind could never see. Adaptability now is no longer optional. It becomes a survival skill. The world is unpredictable. Markets shift, economies fluctuate, personal circumstances change. A mind trained in rigidity cracks under pressure. A mind trained in flexibility bends, adapts, and flows without losing its essence. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before the light bulb illuminated the world. Each failure was not defeat, it was adaptation. He learned, adjusted, and applied knowledge incrementally. Your ability to pivot without losing your mission is what separates dreamers from doers, wishers from achievers. Resilience emerges next, not as mere endurance, but as creative resilience. The mind learns to interpret adversity as feedback, not punishment. You stop labeling setbacks as personal inadequacy and instead see them as instruction. This allows you to take calculated risks, innovate under pressure, and persevere in the face of doubt. Every obstacle becomes a catalyst, every challenge a teacher. You internalize that life is neutral, and only your perception gives it meaning. You realize that suffering is unavoidable, but failure is optional. Learning becomes a lifelong obsession. You stop consuming content to feel inspired, and instead consume to act. You study systems, patterns, human behavior, and leverage points. You examine winners not with envy, but with curiosity. What habits, decisions, and disciplines allowed them to rise? What failures did they endure silently that others never saw? And most importantly, you integrate this knowledge, turning insight into application. Knowledge without execution is vanity, action without insight is chaos. Mastery lies at their intersection. Now your identity begins to evolve. You no longer think of yourself as a follower, a bystander, or a victim. You see yourself as a creator, a problem solver, a force moving deliberately toward impact. Your actions reflect this identity. Your decisions no longer come from desperation or fear, but from alignment with your vision. And the world begins to respond differently, not because it changed, but because you did. You understand that true wealth, the wealth Napoleon Hill wrote about, is never only monetary. It is mental, emotional, and spiritual. It is the clarity to see what others miss, the discipline to act when others hesitate, the courage to stand when others falter, the gratitude to remain humble when success arrives, the adaptability to thrive in chaos, and the resilience to turn every setback into fuel for forward motion. When you operate from this place, opportunities multiply. Doors open where there were only walls. People are drawn to your energy. Resources align in ways that feel almost magical. But this is not luck. It is the inevitable result of internal order. The world cannot resist a mind that is intentional, disciplined, and unwavering. It will always mirror your internal state. At this stage, money, influence, and impact flow naturally, but they are secondary. The primary victory is mastery over your mind, the liberation from scarcity thinking, fear-driven decisions, and self-imposed limits. You become unstoppable not because life is easy, but because you have become sovereign over yourself. You have broken free from the prison that kept most people stuck in mediocrity. You have redefined what is possible. And here is the most profound realization. You were never broken. You were never weak. You were merely conditioned to believe you were. Every obstacle you thought would hold you down was a mirror, reflecting the untrained state of your own mind. And now trained, disciplined, and awakened, you move with certainty, confidence, and purpose. You are no longer a product of circumstances. You are the architect of destiny. Your mind is now fertile ground for greatness. Every thought you nurture, every action you take, every decision you make compounds. You are no longer limited by fear, doubt, or lack of knowledge. You are empowered by clarity, strengthened by discipline, enriched by gratitude, sharpened by adaptability, and fortified by resilience. You have become, in every sense, a force of nature, relentless, intentional, and unstoppable. So when you look at the world now, you see it differently. You see not barriers but bridges, not limits but leverage, not chaos but opportunity. You recognize that every great figure in history, from Edison to Carnegie, Lincoln to Disney, faced the same fears, doubts, and struggles. What separated them was their willingness to master their minds, persist relentlessly, and act decisively. And now it is your turn. The only difference between you and them is the choice you make today. The decision to refuse limitation. The decision to think independently. The decision to take responsibility for your thoughts, your actions, and ultimately your life. Break free from mental poverty. Step into clarity. Embrace discipline. Act relentlessly. Persist through failure. Adapt without hesitation. Learn constantly. Cultivate gratitude. Fortify resilience. And in doing so, you will not just chase success, you will become it. You will not just escape limitation, you will transcend it. Remember this, the world does not create limits, you do. And the moment you stop accepting those limits, the chains fall away forever. The power to shape your destiny is inside your mind, and it has always been there. The question is simple, will you finally claim it? If you are ready to live with unstoppable focus, unshakable belief, and relentless action, start today. Begin now. Commit fully. And watch as your life transforms in ways you once thought impossible. And if this message resonated, if you feel the fire within, you ignite even a fraction of what's possible, make a decision that matches that fire. Hit the subscribe button. Join a community of minds determined to think differently, act decisively, and break free from mental limits. Let this be your first action toward mastery. Because growth begins with a single step, and the time to take it is now.